Estamos en el séptimo vicio con el fundador y la mente detrás de Porcupine Tree. He has an amazing solo work, which includes Insurgentes, The Raven That Refused to Sing and Other Stories, Hand Cannot Erase, the mini album 4.5, the amazing multi-talented producer, composer, the one and only Steven Wilson.
Thank
How
you.
Are you?
That was a great intro.
Yeah.
I'm very well, thank you. I'm very happy to be back in a place I always love to come. Yeah.
There seems to be there really is a special connection with Santiago, with Chile. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I came here for the first time like 3 or 4 years ago, and I was in shock, you know, because one of the things you can't really judge anymore is how many fans you have based on your record sales, because nobody buys records anymore. So, you know, the first time I came to Chile, Santiago, I had no idea that there were so many people that were listening to my music, had been listening to it for, you know, years in some cases, and were very passionate about it. So I was kind of in shock, you know, a very pleasant shock. I had the same thing when I went to India, I had the same thing when I went to Mexico, you know. There are places in the world where you don't sell records. I mean, you sell a few, but not substantial. But you go and you realize that the music has permeated much, much further than the record sales would suggest, you know. And you feel so loved and appreciated, and you feel that people really have an empathy with the music. And Chile seems to be one of those places.
All the people that I know that have go to your show, myself included, you know, we get the sense that we experience almost like a movie. Right. Developing on a stage, right? You also have compared your show to a cinematic experience,
yes.
A theater experience,
yes.
Which is awesome. Which gets me to the question. You're a movie aficionado. You love movies. You have declared that you draw inspiration from movies. Un Chien Andalou, Buñuel, you like it. Don't Look Now, Nicolas Roeg, Christopher Nolan. We have talked about. I don't know, David Lynch. Many filmmakers. What do you think is the connection between yourself watching those astonishing movies, and where do you think the chemistry lies where you go to create music?
I think for me, it's all about storytelling, and it's storytelling specifically in the long form. Now, you know, a lot of pop music and rock music is about the 3-minute song. And of course you can tell a story in 3 minutes, of course you can. But I think there's something about the long form that people are very used to when it comes to cinema, and they're very used to it when it comes to the world of literature, for example. So people are quite happy to sit down and read a 400-page novel. They're quite happy to sit down and watch a 2.5-hour movie. But it's much harder to persuade them to engage with a piece of music over the breadth of a whole album. Most people are disciplined only to listen to music in these little bite-sized chunks. Now, if you take that analogy to cinema and literature, it means we'd only ever be reading short stories and watching short movies. Why should that be the case? So for me, ever since I was a very small child, I've always seen music as something analogous with cinema and literature, in the sense that you can take the listener on a much longer journey, emotional, musical, physical, personal, whatever you want to call it. You can take them on this journey and tell the story in the way that we see in the world of cinema and the world of literature. And it's quite an unfashionable perspective. Or at least it was when I started. You know, the industry will always tell you, just write pop songs that we can get on the radio. And so if you want to be a musician that feels, you know, I mean, I've always felt in a way I am like a film director that happens to make, you know, music, pop music and rock music. But I still think of the album as my equivalent to a feature-length film or a full-length novel. And I want to take the listener on a similar kind of roller coaster ride.
As a child, can you recall a number of films that really blew you away?
Yeah, I remember seeing mostly European films, you know, on British TV. Are you familiar with the director Lindsay Anderson? Oh,
yeah.
Lucky Man?
Yeah.
If?
Yeah, Malcolm McDowell.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And there's a sequel to that called Oh Lucky Man, which is even more bizarre and even more, you know, inspiring. I remember seeing those movies as a very young kid, and I loved the fact that there was almost... In fact, this is what I love about cinema. This is what I love about the European sensibility. It's the what I call dream logic. It's not predictable. It has... I mean, it's not something exclusive to European. I mean, people like David Lynch have it. Of course they do. You know, this sense that anything could happen. The story could take any twist and any turn, and the more surreal in a way, the better.
Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Picnic at Hanging Rock.
Australian director Peter Weir, right?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible film. And obviously Nick Rogue's films have that. They have like an almost dream-like quality. It's the logic of dreams. It's the atmosphere of dreaming. And you know, Un Chien Andalou, you already mentioned, of course, has that too. In more recent years, I've seen films like Ben Wheatley's films, and also Under the Skin, the Jonathan Glazer film. Scarlett Johansson, yeah. I mean, for me, those kind of movies still have that power of you know, that kind of almost dream-like state. And of course, you hear it in my music too. At least I hope.
Even a movie that I'm sure you saw, which is Let the Right One In, the vampire movie.
The Swedish version, not the American remake. No.
Which is amazing. And Be Witty goes along in that movie. You know how old is the girl really?
Right.
And
absolutely. No, that was one of my top. I mean, I had to pick my top 20 movies a couple of years ago, and that was definitely in there. You know, things like Herzog's Aguirre, Wrath of God. I mean, I remember seeing that on TV when I was a kid, you know, and just being absolutely riveted by the performance and the atmosphere and the music, and the way all of these directors also have incredible kind of use of music, whether it's Peter Weir in Picnic at Hanging Rock, or you know, Under the Skin's got that amazing Michel Levy score. You know, so for me, the power of music and image were always kind of like together in my head.
There's a movie of Peter Weir, and I'm sure you saw it. It's called Fearless, with Jeff Bridges, which has a soundtrack or score, I don't know, which is amazing. Kronos Quartet, Penderecki, Gorecki, Arvo Part, and you say,
yes, very new, very contemporary orchestral score.
Amazing. Yeah. Tell me if this story is true or not. You were walking downtown these days, and suddenly, in a street, you hear your own music, and it is coming from a DVD store, a movie store. Yeah,
the day before yesterday, the day we arrived. That's right. How did you hear about that?
Because I work there.
Oh, really? Oh, okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah. So the guys treated me. Wow.
Well, it's literally around
in Chile. We said, "Weón, estuvo aquí Steven Wilson," which means, hey man, Steven Wilson was here, and I'm a fan of it. Well, they send you some movies as a gift.
Okay.
Well, I know you like Arvo Part.
Very much.
Tabula Rasa is one of the most.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
This is a Chilean movie which has subtitles in English, which is, you know, it's called El Club de Pablo Larraín.
Okay, wow.
Which is a group of pedophiles, priests, that hang in a house, and they have to, you know, confront their own sins and demons.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Amazing film.
Okay. Paedophile priest, very topical right now, because Spotlight's just won the Oscar, yeah.
You have music videos, animated music videos, stop motion and else.
Yes, Routine, The Raven,
Drive Home,
Drive Home.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the quality that animated short films or music video has that channels so great and so profoundly your music?
Because I think that there is an element of fantasy in my music. Now my music is not you know, a lot of music that comes from my genre tends to be, you know, this cliche that it's all about fantasy and space. My music is not. My music is about inner space. It's about human beings. It's about planet Earth. It's about the problems of being on planet Earth. But there is an element also, like we were talking before, of the surreal and of the dreamlike state, and animation is perfect for that. It is perfect for that, and it also has kind of inherent in it. A kind of longing for childhood, a kind of nostalgic quality. Animation, not that all animation is for children, of course it's not, but it's still, even when it's for adults, it has that sort of kind of childlike quality to it. So to me it connects back to childhood, it connects back to innocence, it connects back to nostalgia, and I love, it just seems to resonate very well with my songs.
You know, Mi Vecino Totoro, do you know Hayao Miyazaki?
I might know some of his other films. It's not Princess Kaguya.
Yeah,
yes, yeah, of course. I've seen
I
it,
mean, Princess Mononoke, Princess Kaguya
You're
is
right,
our
okay.
Ghibli story. That guy is amazing.
I don't know this one. Yes, he is amazing. Yeah, okay,
and
fantastic.
Since I know you like Miles Davis' Beaches Drew, we have the Ascensor,
Okay.
which is the soundtrack is done by Miles Davis
Wow.
in this Louis Malle film.
Oh, El Ascenso de
Yeah.
Le Chauffeur.
Yeah.
Okay, I have the soundtrack. I've never seen the movie.
Great.
Wow, that's
So you
fantastic.
have it now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a beautiful soundtrack, yeah.
Yeah. I think my perception is that you, whether you like it or not, or you get a sense of it or not, you form, I think, a group of other contemporary musicians that are more or less your age, that are, exploring new sounds, combining new sounds, not afraid of pushing the envelope, which are amazing. So you are also contemporary to guys like Mike Patton, Trent Reznor, Maynard James Keenan, Damon Albarn, guys who seems to be not caring about mainstream whatsoever.
Curious, yes.
Yeah.
Curious about the possibilities of music.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you see a sense of connection there? I mean, do you follow the work?
They're all much more successful than me, that's for sure. But no, I know what you mean. I mean, you're flattering me to include me in the company.
Yeah.
Some of these guys are particularly, Trent Reznor was a big influence on me.
Where the fuck were you? Where the fuck were you?
I think you're right. I think there is. One thing that you're raising there, possibly without meaning to, but which to me is a little bit sad, is that most of the really creative musicians now are older than they used to be. Now, historically, experimental music was always made by kids. The most extraordinary music was made by kids, people in their early 20s. You go back and you look at what the Beatles were doing in their 20s, what Pink Floyd were doing in their 20s, what Led Zeppelin were doing in their 20s, any of these extraordinary groups in the past. Now it seems to me that the really interesting music is being made by an older generation. You could go older, you could say Scott Walker, a guy in his 70s. You could say Neil Young, a guy I think also in his 70s. And it seems to me these are the guys, and perhaps the guys you've mentioned and myself, that are really still pushing the musical boundaries now. And I'm not sure when that changed. It seems to be the last 20 years, the really experimental music is coming from an older generation of musician. And the younger kids are making relatively quite ordinary mainstream music. So it's like the whole thing is kind of flipped around. And I don't know whether it's a generational thing, whether the people you're talking about, including myself, we grew up in a time when music was still incredibly inspiring, and I mean mainstream music. I mean, I remember growing up and bands like The Police and Talking Heads were #1 in the chart, That era seems like a century ago now. The idea that something that interesting but still pop could be #1 in the mainstream chart seems like a very dim memory now. But I think the musicians you're mentioning, we grew up in that time. We remember when pop music was also experimental. For me, Bowie is the great, I mean, at the age of 69, passed away unfortunately, but still making a record which is as experimental as anyone is doing. So for me, he's the great example of someone that continued to explore and be curious about the possibilities of music. And I don't see that so much in young musicians, unfortunately. I see a lot of young musicians that are very committed to being able to shred, play as fast as possible. But that's not music, that's sport. Do you know what I mean? That's nothing to do with music. That's turning music into some kind of Olympic event. And I don't see that as music and creative at all. So I think it has a lot to do with the era that we grew up in and what we remember. That whole 80s scene was very inspiring.
Let me recommend to the audience, to the people of Séptimo Vicio, I'm going to recommend 2 movies, and then you too. you other two, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to recommend Wicker Man.
Yes.
The Wicker Man.
Yes.
Definitely. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The Wicker Man, and a stop motion movie which I don't know if you have seen, which is amazing. It's called Mary and Max.
I have not.
No?
I've not heard of it. No.
Delicious film.
Mary and Max. Okay. Now my turn.
Now your turn.
Okay, I'm going to recommend Under the Skin, which is simply my favourite movie of the last 10 years. A beautiful, surreal science fiction movie, but a science fiction movie that is all about human beings, what it means to be. I always feel the greatest science fiction movies are always about actually the human condition. They're not about space at all. I've never been a fan of things like Star Wars. I've always enjoyed much more these more kind of insular movies like Moon, you know. So anyway, Under the Skin. And the other movie I'm going to recommend is Ben Wheatley's film called Kill List, which is a movie that is so uncomfortable to watch, but so riveting. And it's a movie that you almost can't categorize. It starts off almost like a Mike Leigh, Ken Loach kitchen sink drama. It becomes this kind of hitman movie, and it ends up being a kind of homage to The Wicker Man, the kind of horror film. The whole idea being that the hunter becomes the hunted, and has been the hunted all the way through, but you don't realize, and he doesn't realize. Extraordinary movie, extraordinary young British director, and he's going to be a real force in future.
Watching Under the Skin, did you have a sort of deja vu about the man who fell to earth?
Yes, it definitely has that
David
atmosphere.
Bowie.
It definitely has that atmosphere. I mean, I pick up elements of Lynch, I pick up elements of Nick Rogue, definitely. But I think what's beautiful about it, and this is what's true of Ben Wheatley as well, is you can, when you watch their movies, you can see the influences, but at the same time they transcend the influences and they create something which is uniquely theirs. It's not that Tarantino thing where it's just a load of bits from other movies. Actually, that's unfair. I think Tarantino also has got his own style, definitely. But absolutely, the reference points are clear. And they're the kind of reference points that, of course, I love. Yeah.
Remember to see Mary and Max.
Mary and Max. Okay, I will check that out. Thank you.
Delicious thing. Stephen.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Enjoyed that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.